Thanks so much for joining us for another live stream episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I really appreciate you coming. For tonight's show, we've got a guest who's had some extraordinary experiences. And by saying extraordinary, as you're going to hear, that just doesn't do it any justice. I mean, when you listen to what he's been through and what he's experienced, it's just really hard to do it any justice. What I'm talking about is, of course, our guest tonight, Cody. If you've checked out the description for tonight's show, he actually stumbled upon a wounded juvenile dogman. So without any further ado, let's get him in here so we can get this started. Cody, thanks so much for coming.
Hey there, Vic. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You are welcome. Cody, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I will do that. But first, before I get into that, I want to say a special thanks, of course, to you, Vic. You're amazing for this service that you provide. You know, as I told you when we talked the other day, I've never told anybody about any of this before. And it lifted such a burden off of my shoulders to finally be able to talk to someone about it. I've been holding on to this for 17 years, and to finally be able to tell somebody, it was, I just feel better all day, every day. It feels great. So thank you so much for that and everything you've done for everybody else as well.
Oh, you're welcome. Wouldn't have it any other way, and I'm so glad to hear it's helped you.
And if Kim and Keith, you both were on relatively recently as well, doing live streams and videos, I want to thank both of you as well. Hearing your stories really helped me to finally decide to come forward. Because I actually discovered Dogman Encounters probably about 3 months ago. And, I've been just listening every single day. I feel like, Vic, I talk to you every day. I hear your voice all the time listening to the videos on YouTube. But thank you to those two especially. You really helped me hearing your stories. Kim especially, talking about Ember, the juvenile dog lady. Our experiences are a little similar in that regard. So, and Keith, the things you've talked about, they struck a chord with me as well. So thank you both if you're listening. But anyways, to get on to myself. So yeah, my name's Cody. I'm 28 years old. I grew up in central Minnesota, and I graduated from high school in 2013, and immediately upon graduating from high school, I enlisted in the Navy. And I'm telling you this stuff because it's relevant to the story. It'll tie in later. When I was on active duty, I was wounded in an IED blast overseas. It ripped my head open and gave me a really bad brain injury. And so I kind of want to apologize for that as well to anybody, because my brain don't work right sometimes. So sometimes I'll stutter in my speech, or I'll get stuck on a word, or I'll just kind of blank for a minute, kind of lose where I am. But if that happens, bear with me. I apologize. Excuse me. So anyways, to get into the gist of the encounter here, like I said, I grew up in central Minnesota, and something very important to know about Minnesota is we are no stranger to large game and to predators. That being said, we have coyotes, wolves, bears, the rare occasional mountain lion, the big predators. But it's important to know, where I'm from in central Minnesota, we don't have bears or wolves. You have to go to northern Minnesota for them. And so that's something that even I struggled with for a long time in this encounter, was thinking maybe I just saw a wolf or it was a bear, But I've had the time, 17 years worth, to accept it, and talking with Vic has definitely helped. So anyways, when I was 10 years old in the year 2005, my family bought a small hobby farm out in the country. We had been previously living in a somewhat larger town, still in central Minnesota, not too far away from where we ended up moving to. But the hobby farm was located at a very small town, and we were, of course, in the country outside of town. So it was a big change for me, but I loved it. I absolutely loved the country. I kind of begrudgingly live in Florida now. I very much miss Minnesota. It wasn't in my plans to move to Florida, but here we are. Life never seems to go according to plan. But so anyways, and I'm sorry if I ramble or if I get off track. It happens all the time. So Vic, if I do, please get me back on track, because you know the story. But living in the country was fantastic, and we saw coyotes all the time on this property. We owned over 20 acres of property. The yard proper with the house was about 2 acres, and then we owned two small pastures, one to the one went to the east side of the house and one to the south side of the house, and the house itself actually did face south. And then to the east side, or sorry, the west side was the woods. We owned our own entire big batch of woods. We owned the entire woods. And surrounding the entire property was a barbed wire fence. Because it used to be a hobby farm. You know, the people that owned it before used to have animals. We never did when we lived there. We just had our dogs. You know, we always had 3 dogs in the house when I was growing up, big dogs, and they go in and out, you know. But yeah, I absolutely loved living out in the country. Central Minnesota is beautiful. I find myself homesick quite often. I feel like I really do have almost a spiritual connection to Minnesota, and we even call that my family. We call it the family ranch. It's our own little patch of heaven. You know, I absolutely love going back. My dad still lives there to this day, and my stepmom, and I visit as often as I can. I absolutely love that place. But growing up, I keep saying that. I'm sorry. I saw coyotes all the time. We know we had at least 1 or 2 packs that lived in the woods, and you'd hear them yap at night, yip and yap. And sometimes in the morning, you would see them walk through the yard, not quite close to the house. You know, they kept their distance, but every now and again, we'd see them walking through the yard or through the pastures, especially in the wintertime. In the morning, we'd see them walk through, and I'd go out and I'd love finding the tracks. And I had a black lab. He loved chasing those coyotes. He was something else. But my story really starts here in 2007, the end of July 2007. I don't remember the exact date, but I know it was towards the end of the month. And I was 12 years old at that time. And excuse me. It was probably around midnight, 1 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep that night. And so my bed, how do I explain this? I'm sorry, I'm blanking out again. I had 2 windows in my bedroom. One faced south towards that one pasture in the south, and then the other faced the woods, directly into the woods. And the woods started probably, I'm a terrible judge of distance and time and height and all that stuff, but it was probably about 30 to 40 feet away was the woods to the house. And my bedroom was directly above the kitchen. And directly below my window was the windows to the kitchen that also looked out towards the woods. Well, it was probably around midnight, 1 in the morning, and for some reason I couldn't sleep. And I usually faced inward, in towards the room when I slept, because I didn't have blinds or curtains or anything on the window at that time. So I usually faced inward, not to look out the window, because my bed was directly against that window facing to the west. Well, I decided, I'm going to, for whatever reason, I just turned over in bed and I looked out the west window. And I don't know if it was a full moon that night, but, towards that end of that month is when the moon was waning, waxing. I don't know the phases or the name of it or anything, but it was bright out. You could see. And when I looked out facing towards the woods, now that barbed wire fence I mentioned earlier, it wrapped around the entire property. But for that particular stretch of woods, it stretched from there by the house where I was looking, and it went further down south. We had a small storage barn. We only used it for storage because, again, we never had animals, but it was your stereotypical little red barn everywhere in the Midwest, made of wood, because that's where their animals would be back there. And that whole patch was just completely overgrown because we didn't have animals, and the people that sold us to it hadn't had them for quite some time either. So anyways, the barbed wire fence is important because there was a wooden gate up by the house, and it was probably about 5 feet tall. And I only know that because I was about 5 feet tall too when I was 12 years old. I was 5 feet tall and I weighed about 70 pounds. I've never been a large man. Even now I'm 5'7" at 28 and I weigh 140 pounds. Never been a large man. But anyways, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place. But as I looked out the window from my bed, I turned over and I saw it was bright out. There were no lights on or anything. But I saw what looked like a coyote was by the gate. I thought, oh, there's a coyote there. Cool. But then I looked again. I really paid attention. I'm like, wait a minute. Is he leaning up against the gate? And he was probably about 4 feet, I would say, because it looked like he probably had about a foot left of him, that the gate was over top of him. And I look closer and I notice he's leaning up against it all right, But looking at his paws, his front paws, they weren't paws. It looked like he had humanoid hands. And I'm tired, it's the middle of the night. I can't sleep, but I keep looking, and I'm so fixated on these hands. And he looked so much like a coyote from right there because he had that coyote coloring to him. If you've ever seen a coyote or like a timber wolf, they have kind of that fur color. It's that white mixed in with kind of that light brown, black, and gray. That he had that coloration to him. And I see his head, and his head is looking back and forth like he's looking up and down the house. Excuse me. And I'm just fixated on him at this point. I'm like, what is this little guy? This is the weirdest looking coyote I've ever seen. Well, I look at his eyes as best I can. He keeps looking. He's not darting back and forth, but he's looking up and down like he's really inspecting back and forth at the house. It doesn't look like he's seen me. He's looking at the first floor. My room was on the second floor. And he had the most beautiful golden eyes I have ever seen. And I was starting to get kind of scared. I'm like, this doesn't seem right. The way his head is moving, like I've seen coyotes for so long. I've had dogs my entire life. I've never seen a dog move his head like this. And these hands, what's up with these hands, And I'm getting kind of scared at this point. And against my better judgment, I was kind of a scaredy cat as a little kid, and I've had nyctophobia, fear of dark, ever since I was my entire life, even now as an adult, and that kind of ties into other experiences I've had too, from the military and some potentially supernatural things. But against my better judgment, I decided I wanted to go get a closer look. Because if I went downstairs to the kitchen kind of extended out. There was a little like breakfast nook area. And so that's what was, that stuck out below my bedroom. So I could be a tiny bit closer and look at him. I know I said it was directly below my bedroom. I apologize. It stuck out a little bit. The nook was a little further. But I snuck downstairs past my younger sister and my parents' rooms. They were all sleeping. And it was hard to do because that house was built in 1890. We lived in an old house, so the floors creaked pretty bad, but I was able to sneak down. And I went into the kitchen. I made sure not to turn on any of the lights or wake up the dogs or anything. And I'm crouching down at the window in the breakfast nook looking out at him. And he's still looking back and forth, back and forth. And at this point, I can really see, oh my gosh, he's got human hands. Like straight up, those are human. Those are not. What is this guy? I'm just enthralled. And especially as I see his eyes, like I said, his eyes, I don't even know how to describe it. I was fixated on it. But the hands were what was really throwing me off. I'm like, what is this? This is scary. And I couldn't quite tell from the position we were at, but it looked like he had long claws, like not like dog claws you see on your dog's feet, but it looked like he had long, sharp claws, something scary on his hands. It was kind of hard to tell because he was definitely holding himself up on the gate, and the gate had little divots in it, so he had one hand was stuck through and the other was holding up, but he was definitely holding himself up on that gate, and he was just watching the house. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? Is he looking for someone? Is he looking for something? And as soon as I started thinking that, he stopped looking side to side, and he looked straight into the window, right at me. And those golden eyes pierced my soul. And I was terrified. I darted, and I was scared because I knew that the doors in the house weren't locked, and there was a door right next to that window there, the main door to the house. Because in 2007 in rural Minnesota, we just didn't lock our doors. There was no need for it at the time. And so I panicked and I ran to the door and I locked it. I threw the deadbolt and I locked the little door lock, and I ran back through the kitchen into the living room. I locked the sliding glass door and I ran back upstairs as quiet as I could, not to wake anybody up. And I got in my bed and I covered up in the covers and I prayed to God. I'm like, oh God, please let me live. This thing is scary. Please protect me. I grew up in a Christian household. So I was praying to God and I was terrified. And I sat under the covers for a couple minutes, shaking, terrified, praying. And finally, after, like I said, probably a few minutes, I decided to brave it. And I uncovered my covers and I peeked out the window with one eye and he was gone. He wasn't there anymore. I'm guessing either I scared him away when I threw the lock, because I threw it pretty loud. Deadbolts they make a pretty loud clack if you throw them. And, or if maybe he was just as scared of me as I was as him when he saw me, Excuse me. So needless to say, I didn't sleep that night. I cowered under the covers. And I knew there was no way I could talk to anybody about this. I can't tell my parents or my sister. They'll just think that my sister was 3 years younger than me. She would have been 9 years old at the time. And my parents, there's no way that they would just laugh and tell me I was dreaming, I had a bad dream. But I did ask my dad the next morning. I asked him, I said, hey Dad, have you ever seen anything weird around here? Like especially along the tree line by the woods? Because my dad, he's worked as a power lineman for a long time. So he would wake up in the mornings super early. And so sometimes he would see the coyotes in the early morning before anybody else left. But he said, no, what do you mean? And I said, have you ever seen like any coyotes doing anything weird? And he said, no, just every now and again, I'll see him walking through the fields, but nothing weird. And there never was anything weird on our property ever in the time that we lived there. Like I said, my dad, my stepmom still live there to this day. And anytime I go visit, nothing weird or anything. So we were blessed with that for sure. But no, he said he never saw anything. He said, why'd you ask? I said, I don't know. Maybe I just had a weird dream. I just left it to that. And so the day goes by and I just have no idea what to think. No idea what this thing was that I saw. Slightly terrified, gosh, I hope he doesn't come back again tomorrow. I don't want to see him again. He scared me. But I was so fixated in my head on those eyes, those beautiful, beautiful, just pure golden eyes. And it was so strange to me to be so scared and so captivated at the same time. But the day goes by. And like I said, it's just on my mind all day. And it's the summertime, so I had nowhere to go. 12 years old, I just played around at home. And I played in the woods all the time as a kid. I didn't feel like going out into the woods that day out of fear of potentially what I had seen. But night comes again, and I had put a blanket up over my windows. I didn't want to look outside again. I didn't want to see anything because it was still bright out that night. And yeah, I didn't want to see him again, I wanted to sleep that night, but I still couldn't because I was too scared to sleep. I would still say my prayers and everything, but I didn't know what to do. Well, as the night goes by, I hear what sounds like a loud thump come from down by the storage barn. And my heart started pounding in my chest like, oh no, what is it now? And like I said, I was kind of a scaredy little kid as a kid, but part of me really wanted to get to the bottom of what this was, in case it was the same thing. I don't know. So I decided to once again get up. I snuck downstairs. I put my shoes on. And I walked down to get down to the storage barn. Our house was on top of a little hill. So I had to walk down these concrete steps that led down to the driveway and walk around the garage, and then a little bit back again towards the tree line, back where that one pasture met the woods, was where the storage barn was. And again, that's all we were using it for at that time, was storage, because we didn't have any animals. And I had a little light with me. You know, it's 2007. That's before the super advent of smartphones, and I didn't have a phone anyway. I was 12 years old. Just back in the day, at that time, 12-year-olds didn't have phones. But I had a little light. I didn't need it though, because it was pretty light out from the moon. And I walked to the storage barn, and I can see, you know, it had just the standard sliding barn door to it, and there was only the one door. So there was no way anything or anyone else could have gotten in. It was only through the sliding door. And I could see that the only way that we didn't have a lock on it. Like I said, in central Minnesota in 2007, we never locked our doors. We never had any need to. The only thing we had to prevent it from opening and closing was that we had a little hook latch on it, if you know what I'm talking about, just one of those tiny little ones. And we would just latch that at night so that the thing wouldn't slide open in the wind or anything, you know. We never had any worries about anyone going in there. Well, as I get closer, I see that the door is open a little bit, and the hook is undone. It wasn't broken. It was still on the wall. You know, it didn't look like it had been broken or anything. It had been manually undone by someone or something. And my heart is pounding so hard at this rate, it feels like it's going to stop. I'm like, I'm 12 years old. I'm going to have a heart attack. But I pressed on because that innate curiosity. I pushed through the scaredy cat. And the light switch to the storage barn was right on, immediately on the left side as you would go in. So I knew where it was. So I stuck my hand in through the little slit and I flicked on the light. And immediately I could see through the little opening in the door. It was sitting in the back corner behind the riding lawnmower. It looked like it was licking itself, its front left arm. And this was the first time that I finally got a really good look at it. He had the canine legs and feet. And then when it went up and it got to his torso, it started to look very humanoid. And he was male. He had genitalia, I could tell. But like I said, he had kind of that coyote coloring to him, that mixture of the white, the gray, the brown, black, all that stuff. And he had the hands is what I immediately focused on, because he did have humanoid hands. He had long fingers and he had the claws. And I could see his arms seemed almost a little bit too long for what it would be for a dog, you know. And as soon as he saw me, he immediately turned to me, and with those golden eyes, it made me freeze. And his fur started to puff up. His tail was all puffed up, and his shoulders and around his head. Now, I don't quite think he had a mane. He definitely had longer hair come out of like his neck and the side of his head, you know. But the fur tapered as it went further down. He definitely had it on the shoulders, and then as it started to go down his arms, it tapered a little bit to be less hairy. And that was kind of that way on his chest as well. And I'm sorry if I kind of, it's still something to talk about. This is only the second time I've talked about it, you know, because I've talked with Vic about it, and Vic is the only one, and now I'm telling it to everybody. But he curled his lips up, and I could see his teeth. These are the sharpest looking teeth I've ever seen on anything. These didn't look like the teeth I would expect to see on a coyote. And he started growling. And I felt that growl in my bones. It rattled me. I live in Florida now. If you've ever heard an alligator bellow, they have a really low bellow. It sounded a lot like that. And obviously not reptilian. But it sounded a lot like that, and it just rattled me. Oh, and my heart pounding out of my chest. But I immediately decided to, I put my hands up close to my body, and I put my palms out. And I started talking to him. I said, hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. It's okay. Utterly terrified. And I got a good look. It looked like he had a big scratch on his left forearm, the inside of it. And it looked like that's what he was licking when I had gone in. And I said, I bet he caught himself on the barbed wire, because I caught myself on that sometimes too. And anytime I'd go out and I'd walk the pastures or the woods, and I would go up to the barbed wire, and I would see patches of fur on it every now and again. I know deer got stuck on it sometimes. They'd nick it as they jumped over, and I found patches of coyote fur and stuff like that. But I thought maybe he got caught on that, maybe even after he ran off yesterday, if this is the same one. So what I decided to do, again, keeping my hands up and make sure he's seeing them, and I'm trying to make sure that he knows I'm not a threat. The storage barn was kind of being used as my dad's hangout spot at that time, kind of like a man cave, And he had a fridge in there. My dad's a hunter. He always has been. So he always had meat in the fridge. And I know he had a lot of rolls of summer sausage in there. So what I decided to do, I kept my hands up again, and I kind of slowly inched over to the fridge, keeping my eyes on him the whole time. And he didn't let me out of his sight either. And he's still growling at this point. I about wet my pants. So I go to the fridge and I take out a roll of summer sausage, because I know my dad wouldn't miss a roll or two. And I held it up for him to look at it, and I slowly set it on the ground, and I rolled it forward. And he picked it up with his right arm, the good one, and he immediately scarfed it down. And at that point, he stopped growling, but he was still looking at me. And I decided, I said, do you want another one? So I pulled a second one out and I rolled it to him. And he picked that one up a little more slowly and ate that one a little more slowly, keeping his eyes on me. But he wasn't growling anymore. He'd put his teeth away. So he's just keeping his eye on me. I'm keeping it on him. I figure at this point, he figures I'm not going to hurt him. I'm not going to do anything stupid. Well, I was about to do something stupid, actually. And here's why. But I saw the scratch. And I love animals. I've loved animals my entire life. And canines, especially canids, wolves, have always been my absolute favorite animal. And here I am in front of this thing that looks like a combination wolf and person, And he's hurt, and he's young. I assumed he was young, because he's about 4 feet tall. And he looked like his body shape was kind of like mine, and I was young, so I wanted to help. I didn't like seeing him bleeding. And my dad had his hunting supplies in there and some lockers, and I knew he had a first aid kit. So once again, keeping my hands up, my palms out, so that he knows, I'm not going to do anything. I slowly walk over to the lockers, and I get the first aid kit out. And I take the box out and open it up, and inside it's got some gauze and some cotton balls. And it's got some other stuff in there too, like alcohol peroxide and stuff like that. So I thought, I can help this thing. I can help him. And I turn and face him. I never took my eyes off him. I faced my body towards him. And I start slowly walking forward. He curls his lips back up. shows his teeth and starts growling. And I stop and I try to reassure him, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help. It's okay. I'm trying to be as not terrified as I was, my voice was definitely shaking, probably about as bad as it is now. Worse, definitely. And I slowly walk forward to him and I set the box down and I show him my hands. I'm like, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help. And I didn't want to use any of the peroxide of the alcohol on him because I didn't want it to sting and then him jerk up and get mad, do anything bad. But I took out the cotton balls and I very slowly stretched out to him and I start patting it, and he kind of jerked back a little bit at first. I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm just cleaning the blood a little bit. It's okay. So I'm dabbing the wet blood off as best I can. And then he stops growling at this point, but he's still piercing his gaze at me. And so I'm slowly, carefully as I can not to piss this guy off. And so finally, once I get to a point that I think the blood has gotten to a point that it's not going to be super wet anymore, super, super bleeding out, I take out the gauze and I start to slowly wrap it around his arm. And this is when I finally had the chance to actually physically touch this dog man. And he felt firm. His arm did, there was some muscle to him. He was small. He wasn't a jacked bodybuilder like the adults that you always hear about, but he was firm. And I'm slowly wrapping this around as gently as I can, loosely as I can, so that it's not too tight, it doesn't cut off circulation. And that way, if he so chooses to, he can tear it off, chew it off, whatever, fall off. And the only way as a kid that I knew how to tie things was in the shoelace knot. So I tied a very poor shoelace knot to finish it off. And this whole time he's looking at me, he's just piercing my soul with those beautiful golden eyes, not taking his eyes off me. And I set the gauze down. I set the whole box aside and I slowly back up, hands up. I'm like, I'm not going to do anything. You're okay. You're good. I'm not going to hurt you. And I back up against the wall so that he's got his space. And he kind of looks at it a little bit, he's inspecting. He takes his eyes off me for a second. And I guess he realized he was good, and that I wasn't going to do anything to him. And so then he looked back up at me and we just looked at each other for a little bit. I keep saying it, but I was utterly terrified. I was shaking so hard. My heart's beating out of my chest. And I'm completely enthralled by him at the same time, thinking, what is this guy? I've never seen anything like this. This is not a coyote. I know he's not a wolf. We don't have wolves here, But the hands give everything away, of course, because what dog has humanoid hands? So anyways, he decides he's good. He doesn't need to be in here anymore. His wounds are clean and he is good to move on his way. So what he does, he's been sitting in the corner this whole time, right behind the lawnmower. And he puts his hands on the mower and lifts himself up. He almost looked kind of awkward when he was doing it, like he wasn't used to maybe standing on 2 feet. And I think that's why, when I think back to it, when he was at that gate by the house, I think he was holding himself up because he wanted to stand up to look, but he just wasn't good at it yet because he was still young. So he hoists himself up on the lawnmower. And when he does it, I hear these pop sounds. It sounds like his legs are popping as he stands up. Now, I know that sound all too well because now my knees pop every time I stand up too, thanks to my injuries from the military. But he props himself up and he's still looking at me, And then he looks down at the ground to kind of find a place. He pushes up a little bit off of the lawnmower And he goes down on all fours. He's standing up. And he starts walking, and he's walking just fine because it was just a scratch. I don't think it was deep or anything. The blood stopped. I was able to stop that pretty quickly. But when he started walking, the movement looked very natural, like something that should be happening. But when he walked, he reminded me of a large cat, almost like a tiger. Because his front shoulders, as he was walking, they moved up. If you've ever seen like a tiger at a zoo or in a video or anything, their shoulders really kind of pop up when they walk. And his front did that as he walked, but it looked natural. It was just very strange to see that on a dog-like figure, But he walked over to the door and he stopped just before he got out and he looked back at me. And I'm thinking, oh, no, 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 please, please. And I could have sworn at the time that I heard a voice say, thank you, as he looked at me. But his mouth didn't move, And only now, as I'm older and I'm seeing all this Dogman stuff, that it may have been mind speak telepathy. Who knows? We don't know about these creatures. But I could have sworn I heard something say thank you. And then he turned his head back towards the door and he kind of leaped out. And then I heard him running through the pasture, and I could hear him heading towards the tree line. And I'm thinking I'm just going to die at this point. I'm going to drop dead of a heart attack. What the heck did I just witness? And even at 12 years old, I said something worse than heck to myself, And I know Vic likes to keep it light and avoid that kind of language. So of course I'll refrain from it. But I'm like, what the heck just happened? What is this thing? Oh my gosh. So I go back up to the house. I lock the doors again. And I go back up to my bed and I get under the covers again and I just start praying. And I'm asking myself, God, what did I just see? What did I just witness? What are you testing me with? And there's no way, once again, that I ever could tell my parents about this. They would just laugh and tell me I had a crazy dream. And I became kind of irritable after that experience. And people definitely noticed that I became irritable, angsty. I was 12 years old. I was almost a teenager. And, everybody becomes angsty as a teenager. So, but I wasn't an angsty teenager. I just, like I said, I had that irritability to me because I didn't know how to register what I had just seen, and I couldn't tell anybody. I felt there's no way that I can ever tell anybody anything that just happened and nobody would believe me. I thought about telling my pastor at church, but I decided against that because I didn't feel that. I felt that it probably would have immediately gone into, again, either you had a bad dream, you have an overactive imagination, or maybe what you saw was demonic. I don't think he was demonic. I felt him. I touched him. He was corporeal, and nothing about me screamed evil about this creature. He was simultaneously the most terrifying and the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. So that's the end of the first encounter with my Dogman. And of course, at the time, I didn't know he was a Dogman. I didn't know what Dogmen were. And really, the thought of a werewolf didn't cross my mind either at that time. I just had no idea. The only thing I had ever had to base it off of was the coyotes that I would see sometimes, and the wolves. But I knew we didn't have wolves in that part of the state. So anyways, that's the end of the first encounter. 2007, I was 12 years old. Well, we fast forward now to the December of 2012, the beginning of December. And I was in my senior year of high school at that time. And I was driving home one night from a school basketball game. I played in my school's pep band, and we were playing for the basketball team that night. And I was driving home. I had my first car. And my sister was staying at a friend's house that night, my younger sister. And my parents were out on a date with my my aunt and uncle on a double date, so I was going home alone, which was nothing new. I'd been staying home alone since I was a very young child. My parents were very trusting. They raised me very well. They were both veterans as well. Um, so as I'm driving home, the school was probably about 10 miles away from our house. It was in a totally separate town. And so it took some time to get home, especially in December. In Minnesota, we got snow. And it was pitch black outside. There was no moonlight outside like there was when I encountered the dog man for the first time. And as I hit the gravel road, it's completely covered in snow, but I knew where the gravel started and the pavement ended when it took the time to get outside. Or took the time to get out into the country, rather, excuse me. I'm driving on the gravel road, and there's cornfields on both sides of the road here as I'm driving on this part to get home. And obviously in the wintertime, there's nothing in it. It's just an empty, snowy field. But as I'm in between these fields on the gravel road, I start to hear a sound. It sounds like a thwomp, thwomp, thwomp. I thought, what is that? Is that I hope it's not my car, because, I had an old beat 'em up car. Who didn't as their first car as a teenager? So I roll my window down just a little bit so I can kind of hear and see if it's like the engine or something. And I hear it getting louder, thwomp, thwomp, thwomp. I'm like, that's something running in the snow. And it sounded big. I thought, that sounds too big to be a deer. And we had neighbors across the way that had two really big St. Bernard dogs. And I thought, did the St. Bernards get out? This thing sounds huge. And I slowed down and I stopped to really try and get a sound of this thing, and it's pitch black outside. I can't see anything except for directly in front of me from my car's headlights. And it almost gets to a deafeningly loud point when it gets right up on me. I can tell, oh crap, whatever this is like right up on me. And then immediately as I'm thinking that, it shows up right in front of my headlights. And it stops. It was on all fours. It stops right in front of the car. And it's a dog man. It's a huge dog man. Again, at this time, I had no concept of what dog man was, what a werewolf, if it was a werewolf, anything like that. That never crossed my mind. But knowing what I know now, it was a dog man. And he was huge. He was gigantic. He had to have been at least 7 feet tall. Again, I'm a terrible judge of distance and height and time and everything like that. But he had to have been at least 7 feet tall because he towered over my car. And I've heard it a lot myself, even on this show with other people's experiences. He had the shape of the werewolf from Van Helsing, the 2004 movie Van Helsing. Wonderful movie. I love that movie. It has some of the best looking CG werewolves I've ever seen, but he had that shape to him, that first one, the gray one in the beginning of the movie. Excuse me. And he had that coyote coloring to him again. And I thought, oh no, is this another one? Is this an adult? This time I said, it's been years. It's been, 5 years since I even saw something like this. And this one is huge. It's standing probably 10, 15 feet in front of me in this car. And he's towering over the car. He's huge. And his claws were large as well, probably an inch or two. Again, I'm a terrible judge of distance, but he was huge. He had big claws and he was jacked. He had the bodybuilder body, the Mr. Universe. He had the biggest biceps and shoulders and chest and all that stuff. And I'm mortified. I'm frozen completely. And once again, I see the golden eyes. And they're peering into my soul. He's looking directly at me. I couldn't tell if he could see me or not through the headlights, but he was looking directly in my direction. And his ears were perked up. He had the kind of tall pointed ears. And those were pointed up. He was looking at me. He wasn't puffed up his fur or anything, but he was just staring. And again, my heart's pounding out of my chest. I'm terrified. I'm praying to God. I said, oh no, 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 Lord, please don't let it end this way. And I got this sense of existential dread just fell over me. And I've heard before that that when people are about to die, they get this sense of existential dread, like they know it's going to happen. I don't know if there's a lot of merit to that or not, but I've heard it before. And I had this absolute feeling of dread. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. God, please help me. I'm going to die. And like I said, I'm just completely frozen staring at this thing. And at this point, I could tell he was looking at me. He could see me through the lights because he's facing me. And he lifts his left arm, his massive left arm, up. And he faces his inner forearm towards me. And I thought, there's no way. This can't be. There's no way that this is that little thing that I helped 5 years ago. But what other explanation was there? He sat there and looked at me. And he showed me his arm. What other reason would he have to sit there and show me that the left arm that I remember patching up? And he stayed like that for probably a minute. My heart's still pounding out of my chest. Still terrified, still have that feeling of dread. But he's just looking at me and I don't know what to do. And finally, after probably a minute or two, he puts his arm back down. And he's still looking at me. He won't take his eyes off me. With just those piercing, beautiful golden eyes. Again, the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And even in this sheer terror of seeing this large creature in front of me, I still had that feeling of, oh my gosh, you are the most terrifying thing I have ever seen, but you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I could not explain it. To this day, I still cannot explain it. I was enthralled by him, you know. Well, finally, after a little bit of that, he gets back down on all fours and he kind of gives me one final look. And then he turns back the way he was running and he takes off on all fours just with astonishing speed. He's gone. Just that thwomp, 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 thwomp in the snow as he's going. And I'm just frozen in place. I can't think what to say, what to do. I said another prayer to God. I'm like, thank you, God, for protecting me, for not letting him kill me. Oh, gosh. So I put the pedal to the metal and I got back home as soon as I could. Oh, gosh. And it's another thing I thought, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to tell anybody any of this. There is no way on God's green earth I will ever be able to tell anyone. No one is ever going to believe me. They're going to think I'm crazy. So anyways, that was the second experience with him. And the months go by. I graduated high school the following spring. And I was 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I was in boot camp. And in 2015, when I was 20 years old, I was sent overseas as a part of Operation Inherent Resolve, the fight against ISIS. And that's where I was wounded. I was wounded in an IED blast. And I think I talked about that a little bit at the start here. Did I say that, Vic? Did I mention that I had been injured?
You did.
I did. Okay, thank you. Just to make sure. If anybody wasn't in the stream at that time, anyway, too, I was injured in an IED blast overseas, and it split my head open, and it gave me a super bad brain injury that I still feel the effects of to this day. And there's PTSD there, and there's other parts of the body that were damaged as well. My feet, my knees, and my back are absolutely torn up. And that's made things physically, emotionally, spiritually, it's made things very hard over the years to deal with that. And because of that, to make it worse, what's it called? To make it worse, because of that, I became non-deployable. And so I was essentially getting kicked from the military after my enlistment had ended, because I was still able to do duties at a non-deployable unit. I was still able to work around in garrison in the base, so they let me finish out my time at the base. But then when my time was done, I was processed out in 2018 when I was 23 years old. And I was not happy about it, needless to say, because I absolutely loved the military, and I knew my entire life that I wanted to go into the military. Both of my parents were veterans as well. So I was heartbroken, of course, and then dealing with all the issues that had piled up because of it. Yeah, I wasn't in a good place in 2018. I moved back home to Minnesota because I didn't know where else to go, which was fine. I absolutely love it there, So I moved to the town that we had lived in before we moved out to the hobby farm. It was only about a 15-minute drive away, but it was a bigger town. I was renting an apartment on the edge of town that overlooked some cornfields, because it's Minnesota. There's cornfields everywhere, And there was a patch of woods not too far away from that field as well. Because the part of central Minnesota that I lived in was kind of where in southern Minnesota you have the plains, and then in northern Minnesota you have the coniferous forest, the pine trees, and it almost feels like you're in the mountains up north. It's beautiful up there, but we don't have any actual mountains in Minnesota. So central Minnesota, it's known as the hills and lakes region. There's a lot of hills, there's a lot of lakes. There's a lot of lakes everywhere in Minnesota. But to say all that, it was where the hills, I like to call it where the plains meet the woods. So we still had little remnants of the plains and the cornfields everywhere, and we had the woods. So, like I said, I'm not doing too great at this time, because life was not going the way that I wanted it to. I had expected it to, and I felt like I didn't have a whole lot of people that I could turn to even talk about those experiences that I had in the military. People wouldn't understand. And at that time, I had gotten a job in law enforcement. And, the job went just about as well as it could, especially with the injuries. I did what I could. I didn't tell anybody about my experience at that point in the law enforcement that I worked with, because I wanted the job. I needed a job. And so I did my absolute best with that, and then time goes by. Then comes the infamous year of 2020. I'm sure everybody remembers what happened that year. So at that point, 2020 rolls around. I'm 25 years old, and I'm just mad at the world, because I'm sure the people that live in the States, at least, will remember that in 2020, those riots started. And I'm not going to comment on any of those. Like I said, I worked in law enforcement. It was a whole thing for everybody, and I had my bad feelings about it too, for sure. But I don't want to say anything divisive, and I don't feel like I would anyway. Anyway. Yeah, so the riots were happening, and they started in Minneapolis. And Minneapolis was only about an hour and 15-minute drive probably east of where I was living. So these riots were happening essentially in my backyard, And seeing the news footage, the videos and the photos of seeing this city burn brought back a lot of bad memories and experiences from my time in the service. Because I had witnessed, in addition to being blown up myself, I witnessed another terrorist bombing, and it brought back all those memories. seeing the city burning, seeing it immediately brought back flashpoints. I was not in a good place. And at that time, I had not officially been diagnosed with PTSD yet because I had not gone to the VA because I was so angry and everything. I couldn't even be bothered. So, needless to say, it was a very bad summer. I ended up quitting my job in law enforcement not too long after that. So, I'm sitting at home in this apartment completely alone with all these bad thoughts, all these bad memories, and these physical injuries, causing problems with everything as it is. And I hate everything. I'm mad at the world. And one night, it was at the beginning of August, and I was sitting in my apartment, just not knowing what to do with myself, just hating the world, hating everything. I get this sudden, strange thought, go look out the window. I don't know why I thought it. I thought, I'm going to go look out the window. Because I was on the top floor of my apartment. It was 3 levels. And so I went to the sliding door where the balcony was, and I look out, and I can see out into the field. And there was moonlight that night. It was illuminated. And that year, that field was empty because farmers, they'll rotate crops. They'll do corn one year, they'll do beans another, and then they'll leave it for a year to let the soil replenish. So the field was empty that year. And I'm looking out the window, and I look out into the field, and I feel like I think I see something. There looks to be a silhouette of something out in the field. I said, there's an animal out in the field. So I opened up the sliding door and I walked out onto the balcony to get a closer look. And I see the eyes. Those haunting, beautiful golden eyes are looking straight at me. It's him. I know it's him this time immediately. And all that terror and all that beauty, he's standing there in that field across the road, looking straight up at me. And once again, he lifts up his left arm and faces the forearm to me to let me know it's him. And I'm just completely taken aback by this. I thought, I haven't seen you in years. Granted, I was gone for quite a while, but I was 25 at that time. The last time I'd seen him, I was 17. And I thought, how did he find me? He had to have known I was there to get that gut feeling to walk out and see him there. And he was standing there waiting for me, when I walked out. Part of me wonders now, all these years later, when I got that that feeling to look outside, I almost wondered if he told me to go. Again, there's the speculation with Dogman, the telepathy. I have no idea. But yeah, I looked out at him and I watched him for a couple minutes. And it was almost like I still felt a sense of fear, but at the same time, it almost felt like seeing an old friend that you haven't seen in a long time. And excuse me. Yeah, after a little while, he decided to, I guess he'd had enough. He propped down and he ran off on all fours into the woods outside of the field. And I went back into my apartment. I sat down on the couch and I cried. And I took it as a sign. It's time to get help. It's time to stop blaming the world for everything and do something about it. So the next morning, I called up the VA and I said, "Hey, I'd like to see about coming in and getting health care." And I was immediately referred to mental health. I was almost immediately, diagnosed with PTSD and anger issues and anxiety, depression, just a mixed bag of all the mental stuff, and we found the problems with my feet, my knees, and my back. So yeah, I got the help I needed at that point. And I really do credit him for putting it in me that night to like it's time. So yeah, that's my story. That's the last time I saw him was the summer of 2020, and then in December of 2021 I moved down here to Florida. Again, it wasn't part of my plan, but I'm here now and I'm trying to make the best of every day. And yeah, that's my story.
Wow, that's a lot to go through. You deserve a lot of credit for holding it together the way you did. Yeah, that's definitely not easy at all. I've already got a question for you, Cody, from Blood Viper. He wants to know, amazing Cody, do you think he was watching over you?
I I have a feeling that I think he was for a little bit. And the reason I think that is because, like I said before, we never had any kind of weird um, experiences on my house at my property when I was growing up. And part of me wondered, is this just such a nice, quiet spot? Surely it was, but is there somebody out there watching us? Is there somebody protecting us? And as I get older and I think about it, there's a chance that maybe our property was his too, and he was out there watching. I didn't think of it at all until now, um, you know, at 28 years old, because I've only really gotten into this dogman stuff in the last couple months now and coming to terms with my own experiences. Um, Potentially, he had to have been a juvenile when I met him. He was 4 feet tall. He was much smaller than the previous time, than the next times that I saw him. Um, so now as an adult, I wonder, did he have family out in our woods? And maybe he was just the youngest, maybe he was just the pup and it was his turn to take over. So in a way, I feel like maybe, yeah, maybe he did watch over us. And I can't I can't explain how else he would have found me in that apartment away from home. He had to have known I was there somehow. I almost wonder, I definitely feel that he imprinted on me. I wonder if I did the same to him.
Yeah, you just might have. Sounds like you did. I've got another question for you from Shannon Umanazer. And her question is, do you think he's still watching over you and you'll see him again? I hope so.
You know, I don't think he's going to come down to Florida. But part of me thinks that maybe, because I've mentioned before, when I moved down here, I feel very homesick very often because I love Minnesota. I almost feel like there's a spiritual connection to me in Minnesota. And I told Vic a little bit about this when we talked the first time, that I dream about him a lot. All those years since the first encounter, I dream about him. And Vic, I didn't mention this part when we first talked. I had forgotten about it because I get forgetful with my head. But ever since I moved down here to Florida, I started getting a different kind of dream every now and again. If anybody out there has ever played like a Japanese RPG game, there's those scenes where a character is like in their dream and they're slowly realizing that I'm in a dream, and it's like pure white or pure black or whatever. In my case, it was always pure white when I've had these dreams, and I see him there. And the first time that this happened, and these are always very short little bursts, little dreams when these happen. He looked at me. In the dream, he's there. And his mouth doesn't move, but I hear him say, "Where are you?" And then it fades out and I woke up. So, and I've had similar dreams like that since. It's pretty infrequent. But I remember I had a dream like that, and he looked at me and he wasn't saying anything. And I asked him one day, and I said, "Are you him?" And he just gave me like a half nod. And I asked him, "Who are you?" And I didn't get a response. And later I had another dream, and I asked him, I said, "Do you have a name?" And again, he gave me that half nod. And I'm thinking in my head, what the heck? And I said, "What's your name?" And he didn't answer. To this day, anytime I've had that, he hasn't answered. Now, again, this may just be dreams. You know, I've always had very vivid dreams my entire life that feel very realistic when I'm in them. And sometimes I wake up very confused in the mornings. I wake up like, where am I? What just happened? You know? But when your entire existence goes plain white and it's just you and this one entity in there, you know, that might be a little different. But it may just be dreams. It may not. But I definitely feel like it's in some way that yes, he is potentially, you know, watching for me in that point. Just to that first dream, just to hear him ask, "Where are you?" It just, yeah.
You never know, it just might be him reaching out to you in your sleep. It's hard to say. I've got another question for you from Darren. Darren wants to know, what state did this occur? Sorry, I got here late.
Sure, no problem. It was in Minnesota. I grew up in central Minnesota.
All right. The next question is from Shannon Umanazer. And her question is, how did you and him compare in height when you first saw him?
When I first saw him, I was 12 years old. I was about 5 feet tall at that time. And the way that I gauged his height was when I first saw him, he was leaning up against that gateway that was on the barbed wire fence. And I know that fence was 5 feet tall because I was as tall as that, or not the fence, the gate was 5 feet tall because I was as tall as the gate at that time. And he looked like when he was holding himself up against it, he looked like he probably had a foot. He was probably a foot shorter. So I gauged that when he was younger like that, when I first met him, he was probably about 4 feet tall.
Not very big at all, but like you mentioned, that definitely changed. All right, I've got another question for you from Allie S. And Allie wants to know, like dogs, do you think they're forever loyal?
You know, I don't know. Like I said, I really haven't known anything about dogmen until these last couple months when I started to really when I found your show, Vic, and that's when I started to really get interested. Now I'm borderline obsessed. I think I think it was just with Vic before the show started. I said, you know, Vic, it feels like I talk to you every night, every day now because I hear your voice every day because I watch all the videos all day long.
You did say that.
I
Yeah,
did
in our
say
first
that. Okay.
conversation.
Oh God. No, I listen to your show when I'm at work. You know, I was at work before this, and I was listening. You have hundreds of episodes. You know, how could you not listen all day long? But yeah, I don't know if they're forever loyal. Everybody has different experiences from what I've heard. You know, I'm very fortunate that I didn't have these negative experiences like some of these people that we've heard on your show. And that's another reason why, you know, when I started off, I gave a special thanks to Keith because Keith had a myriad of experiences, you know, and he felt, if I remember right, he felt like none of his were super traumatic, you know, or super negative. And I feel very fortunate that mine were the same way. Of course, I was terrified, especially the first time being 12 years old and seeing this creature. I have no idea what it was. But who knows? You know, they could potentially be loyal. Um, we just don't have any way of knowing right now. The only thing that I can think of to answer that question is if anybody has listened to the episode 137 of Dogman Encounters with Stripes. The man told the story about the dog man that they had kept and raised. His name was Stripes. I guess there was a sense of loyalty there that he knew the family and the family knew him, Um, who knows, that it could be a thing, I have dogs myself right now, and the dogs are certainly loyal. But I guess I can't speak for a dog man, but we can hope.
Yeah, that's all we can do is hope. You can't think for people, so how can you think for a dog man? That's a good point. I've got another question for you from Kay from 1675. And her question, or his question, is how did the eyes make you feel? Uneasy or otherwise?
They made me freeze like a deer in headlights because I would see his eyes and I just wouldn't know what to think. They were the most beautiful things I had ever seen. The perfect golden color. Especially when he would look back at me, and he'd stare at me, I'd stare right in those eyes and I would freeze, my heart would pound out of my chest, but I was both the most terrified I'd ever been and completely enthralled by him. He probably could have done whatever he wanted to me at that point. So I'm super glad that nothing bad happened. Like I said, when I was in the car, I felt completely defenseless because this thing is huge. He's got me frozen. I can't respond. And I got that feeling I was going to die, but nothing ever did. So
He most certainly could have done anything he wanted to do to you. It's good you realize that. The next question is from Cindy Imhoff, and her question is, or it's a statement at first, absolutely amazing encounters. Thank you for sharing, Cody. Do you think your parents actually did see dogmen on your hobby farm, but kept it from you all these years? Thank you.
I don't think so. My dad has never been a believer in the supernatural cryptids, anything like that. I feel like he definitely would have mentioned something if he had seen something odd. And my mom was the most devout Christian I had ever known in my life. And she unfortunately passed away when I was 18 years old, when I was going through training in the military. Actually, she had cancer. But like I said, she was the most devout woman I'd ever known, most devout person I'd ever known. And I feel like if she had seen something like that, she would have said so, and she probably immediately would have thought it was demonic. Not to say that she was crazy or anything. A lot of people think dogmen are demonic, and they may be. We don't know, but I don't think they are. I certainly don't with the experiences I've had. Um, but no, to answer your question, I don't think anybody in my family ever saw anything. And I've kind of hinted towards my sister a little bit, my younger sister. I've never straight out asked her anything like that, but she doesn't remember a lot of her childhood. She's in her mid-20s now. She has a husband and two children, so I don't want to bother her with it, but I don't think she ever saw anything like that.
You're probably right. I guess if they did have experiences, they probably would have shared those with you. So that's a good point. The next comment and question would be from Carol Hansen. And Carol says and asks, Cody, do you know you're a very special person and a great man? Thank you for your service and sharing your story.
Well, thank you. I guess that's all I can say to that is thank you.
That was nice of her. Looks like our next question is from Blood Vipa. And his question is, I think he was trying to help you heal, or I guess it's a comment saying, I think he was trying to help you heal just like you helped him to heal when he was wounded.
I do feel that way. God, if it weren't for that night of seeing him out in that field, I may not have even been here. I contemplated, like so many veterans do, I contemplated suicide constantly. And I had lost friends to it as well. And I thought, maybe this is just the way to go. So I think in a way he saved my life sometimes, because it was that experience that I finally called the VA and I said, I need some help.
Well, it goes without saying, we're also glad you didn't make that mistake. Yeah, that's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So I'm so glad you didn't do that. The next question is from Shannon Umanazer. And her question is, do you think that maybe he's sending you some kind of telepathic message to come home?
It could be, like I said, I feel like the first thing he asked me in that dream is, where are you? And I feel the pull to go home all the time. I really do. I miss Minnesota so much. I never expected to live anywhere else. I certainly never thought I'd end up in Florida. I thought I'd never even visit Florida. And truth be told, I really don't like it here that much. But I'm not going to be one of those people who moves to a new place and hates on it, complains all the time. It has helped me a lot being here. My physical health has improved greatly because of the warm weather. Minnesota winters are absolute HE double hockey sticks on injuries and bad joints and things like that. So the weather has definitely helped with my physical health. My mental health, in some ways, I get depressed because I'm not home. I'm away from all of my family, everything I've ever loved. But I take it as each day comes. I've left home before. I spent 3.5 years on the other side of the planet. So it is what it is. But I sometimes I do wonder if he wants me to come home. It just that first ever time we're in that dream, he asked me, "Where are you?" Because I haven't seen him since. It's 2024 now. The last time I saw him was the summer of 2020. So who knows?
That just might be what was behind it. You never know. The next question is from Matt McGuire, and Matt wants to know, did the sausage you gave him have a wrapper? What did he do with it?
Oh my gosh, I love it. No, it didn't. It just had the casing on it, like a sausage casing. My dad never bothered wrapping anything.
Yeah, that is a good question about the wrapper. The next question is from Allie S. And Allie wants to know, or says, and then asks, "Oh, he misses you. Maybe you're his only human friend. Do you think you should give him a name?"
I've thought about it, especially after Kim named Ember. The only thing that has kept me from doing it, maybe not the only thing, but the main thing that has kept me from doing it is that another dream I had. I asked him, "Do you have a name?" And he nodded yes. And he hasn't told me in another dream yet. So I don't want to presume to know. I don't want to go naming him something if he's already got one. And again, we don't know if that is the case. I could just be dreaming. But if you have a name, I'm not going to go ahead and rename you. Like, I'm not going to start calling Vic Carl. So if he's got a name, I'll respect that. And if he ever chooses to disclose it to me, I'll let y'all know.
What if my real name actually is Carl, though?
Oh, don't do me like that.
No, I can't say that. All right, the next question is from Darren. It's a comment, actually. Darren says, "I thank you for your service to our country." And I second that. Yeah, thank you so much. The next question is from Shannon Umanazer, and her question is, "Do you think your interaction with him has affected the way he interacts with humans now?"
When he interacts with what?
Humans now.
I hope it has, because he never hurt me. And so I hope he's never hurt anybody else either. It's difficult with these dogmen. You hear all these different things from everybody. He's got different experiences. Some people have ones like me where it was not bad, and then there's others where they're breaking into people's houses and trying to kill their families. These creatures are such an enigma. And I feel like we're never really going to know until we have the chance to finally find them and study them like any other animal. But honestly, I don't want that to happen either, because they don't hurt. In this case, they don't hurt people. Mine hasn't. But what's one bad experience away from them doing that? Like I mentioned before, my dad's a hunter. He's been his whole life. And I've gone with him from time to time. I really don't like, I contradict myself because I absolutely love meat. Oh, I love meat. But I hate I hate the idea of killing. As dumb as that sounds, especially from my time in the military too. But like I said, I contradict myself. But and I love meat. But another reason that I really didn't want to tell anyone, I didn't want them finding him, because it's human nature. I think we have this need. We are the alpha species. We have to control the planet. And I understand that God gave us domain over his creatures, but why treat them badly? And I thoroughly believe that these dogmen are God's creatures too, just like we all are. We're all God's children. But in that, with my dad hunting, he hunted in the woods on our property a lot when I was young, and he would usually bring a deer home every year, and that fed us for a good while. And I love venison. Oh my gosh! But he had one trail camera out there, only one, and he had it set up in front of the deer stand that he set up out there. And I made sure to go check that camera from time to time to make sure that it didn't catch anything, because I didn't want Dad seeing him, because I thought if he did, he's going to try and hunt this thing, and I didn't want that to happen. So like I said, sorry to ramble a little bit, but to answer the question, yeah, I hope it did, and I hope that he doesn't have a bad experience himself and turns around and does something bad like that, so that, yeah, I hope nobody does anything bad to him either. So
Hopefully they won't. And I'm so glad you hid his presence from your dad, because if your dad would have gone out and tried to hunt him, I just don't think that would have ended very well for your dad
no,
at
absolutely.
all. Yeah, definitely. The next question is from Gil Wan, and Gil wants to know, or it's a comment. His comment is such a scary experience, but also a blessing in disguise. And then the next question is from DJ Chris Mack, and DJ Chris Mack wants to know, do you think you might be in for another encounter in the future, Cody?
It could happen. I don't plan to spend the rest of my life down here. I'm only 28 years old. I'll be 29 in a few months. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in Florida. I want to go back home at some point, and I'm sure I will. I have to stay here a little bit longer. I got to stay in my mortgage for a little bit when I bought my house, so it's got to stay for a little bit. But I may. I actually did go back home this last summer. I went home for a week to go visit everybody because I missed everyone. And it was on my mind the whole time, what if I see him again? But I didn't, and I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse, because I don't, I don't know if we should actively be seeking out these dogmen. Just because we have what may not have potentially been a bad experience doesn't mean it couldn't lead to one in the future. They're unpredictable. I may have imprinted on him, he may have imprinted on me, but who knows? He may see me as a snack someday. So I don't think I'll ever actively go out seeking him again. But if I ever do, I'll take it with what I can, And if I ever encounter another one, I certainly know what to expect, I think, a little bit more, and how to handle the situation, and not completely mess it all up.
Well, it goes without saying, I sure hope he never does see you as a snack. That wouldn't be good at all.
Yeah, I'm too small anyway. I wouldn't fill him up too well.
Well, hopefully never find out. The next question would be from Eugene Brooks, and his question is, did his eyes glow in the dark?
I never saw his eyes glow in the dark, no. And that's something that I think about with eye shine. That's different from glowing in the dark, or maybe that's what you meant. If it is, I'm sorry. But I never noticed his eyes glow. And now, listening to all these different Dogman stories, from what I've heard, or from what I can remember, the only ones that I've ever really heard that the eyes glow are the ones that have red eyes. And I kind of have a hypothesis about that. Maybe, we talk about, what are these dogmen? Are they animals? Are they creatures? Are they demonic? Are they from another dimension? I don't know anything about other dimensions. I don't even know if I necessarily believe in the fact that there's other dimensions. I'm so uneducated on the whole thing. But I definitely do believe in demons. I've had my fair share of experiences with demons. I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan for 3.5 years. And Okinawa is widely considered to be haunted because of the atrocities that happened there in World War II. And I saw some stuff in my time there, and other people that I was with there too did as well. It was not an uncommon thing at all. But what I'm getting at is, I think these ones that have the red glowing eyes may potentially be something demonic, because demons can take the shape of just about anything. And the reason I believe that mine wasn't is because, one, I found him as a juvenile, and I could see he had genitals. Like, to my understanding, demons don't reproduce. They don't have children. They don't have the need for genitalia. There's no reproduction. And like I said, his eyes didn't glow, and he had the golden eyes, not the red ones. So that's just a theory. I'm sorry if that was a long-winded question to your answer, or answer to your question, but no, his eyes did not glow that I ever saw.
No such thing as long-winded here. Yeah, by all means, take your time, like I said. I've got a comment from Blood Viper. He says, "You've been through so much for someone so young," and I agree. Thank you for sharing all with us. The next question would be from Gil Wan, and his question is, would you consider dogmen supernatural or just another animal we know little of?
Yeah, so like I said, I almost wonder if the ones with the red glowing eyes are something supernatural, potentially something demonic. But really, with the experiences I had, I think he's an undiscovered creature. I don't even know if cryptid is the right word. He, how do I put this? He almost did feel spiritual to me. He almost does feel spiritual to me. And that's why I said before with Keith's stuff when he talked for a while back, there is almost a spiritual sense with it. And I am a Christian, you know, I accepted Christ into my heart when I was 17 years old. Um, but Minnesota has a very rich history with Native Americans. Now, you don't have to be Native American to be spiritual. I'm not myself. I don't have any Native American history to my knowledge because all parts of my family didn't really come to the US until the turn of the 20th century. So there's really not a lot of intermingling at that point that I'm aware of. But yeah, Minnesota just feels like it has this rich spiritual history with the Native Americans, mainly the Dakota and the Ojibwe tribes. And I almost wonder if you hear the stories about these Native American tribes, especially the northern ones up close to Canada, where we were by, with these experiences with dog-like people. I think it's the northern tribes, and then there's like some group out of Europe that also believes in some kind of dog person type thing. I don't think it's like the same as a dog man. It's like a regular person with a dog's head. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't looked into that too much. But I feel like there is almost some kind of spiritual connection with that, with the land itself. There's, like I mentioned before, I almost feel like a spiritual tie with Minnesota. It's my home. It's where I want to be. And yeah, there could be that potential tie. They could be some kind of spiritual beings. But at the end of the day, I still think that they are probably, like I said, the ones that I found, not the glowing eyes, are flesh and blood creatures that I think are tied to the land. And if that's the case, then they've been there just as long as us, if not longer, you know. They may even be sentient. Who knows? We may not be the only sentient people on this planet. If that's the case, if these stories go back with all these tribesmen and everything, I have no idea. It's just a thought, but yeah.
When you do what I do for half as long as I have, it's only natural that you bounce back and forth from being convinced at one moment these guys are flesh and blood animals out there just trying to make a living, and then the next moment you're convinced they have to be from the ether. So, yeah, that is the ultimate question right there when it comes to dogmen. All right, I've got a comment for you from Super Manny Man, and he says, "I feel he accepted you because of your heart." Then there's another statement from Stella Farrell, and Stella says, "Maybe when you go home, Cody, maybe he will have you his name, and I hope you feel better." I think
Sorry,
that's what she was asking.
can you say that again, Vic? You cut out.
Sure. Stella Farrell said, "Maybe when you go home, Cody, maybe he will have you his name," as I think what she meant, "and I hope you feel better." I guess she's saying that when you go home, he'll let you know what his name is, maybe.
Yeah, maybe that'll be the trade-off to get back home if he really is pulling me home. He's like, "I'll tell you, but only if you come home."
Huh.
I didn't
Yeah.
I didn't see him or anything or feel him when I went home last, but it could happen.
It sure could. All right, I've got another question for you from Blood Viper, and his question is, do you consider yourself lucky that your encounters were favorable rather than terrifying?
No, I would love to go out and have a vicious animal that nobody knows anything about rip me to shreds. I'm so mad that happened peacefully. No, I absolutely hate it. I'm joking with you. I'm sorry if that sounded passive aggressive. Yes, I am absolutely thrilled that it that it went the way it did.
Oh, I'm sure you are. Yeah, that does beat the alternative, definitely. I've got a question for you that's more of a general question. I don't think you would know the answer to this. Don't know for sure that anyone does, but Matt McGuire wants to know, do these creatures have a higher conscious awareness than humans? All we can do is guess about that.
That's all we can do is guess, but it could very well be. If there's any credence to these dream things, if he's trying to talk to me in my dream, then that's not something that just any coyote can do. So it could be.
You're right. That's a good point. Then I've got another comment from Blood Viper. He says, my first sighting of Dogman had yellow eyes and they glowed in the dark.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't notice any glowing in the dark. There was not really even any eye shine either, because I never flashed anything into his eyes other than the lights of my car, but he was standing straight up, so his eyes weren't in the light when that happened.
All right, there's another question for Bravo Johnny, and he wants to know first encounter, what was the weather like, if you remember?
Yeah, the first night I saw him, and then the second night I actually experienced him, it was a clear night. It was a beautiful night. It was the perfect temperature outside. A lot of people think that Minnesota is a perpetually frozen hellscape. It's not. We have very hot, humid summers. It almost reminds me of here in Florida back home. Actually, the summertime does sometimes, but no, it was clear. There was no wind, there was no rain, no nothing. It was a perfectly still night.
I've got another question for you from Zara Assam. And Zara wants to know, hi Cody, do you think you might have a connection with dogmen, or I think she meant, or they have a connection with you?
I can't speak for Dogman as a whole. Like I said, I didn't really know anything about Dogman until a few months ago when I found this show. Um, and I've only seen what I believe to be the same one, and that was 3 times spread out over a long period of time. So I don't know if I have a connection or if they have a connection with me. Maybe mine does. Listen to me, I'm calling him my dog man, but it's hard to say. I don't know if I do have some kind of connection or not. I have always felt kind of kindred with animals, I guess. Like dogs, regular dogs, they tend to know about people. Do you know what I mean, Vic? Like they get a sense of people if they like dogs, if they don't, and then they tend to steer clear of that person, or they like them, they attach to them. And any dog I've ever met has always taken to me pretty quickly. Like right now, I've got a Jolowitz Quentley. Do you know what that is, Vic?
I don't.
A Jolowitz Quentley is the official name for a Mexican hairless. Have you ever seen one of them before?
Oh, yeah, I have.
So I absolutely love that dog. She is the best little dog I've ever had, and she is just glued to me. I've never had a dog this attached to me before, and I call her Luna because sometimes she even looks like a little werewolf for a dog, man. she'll, she'll stand up on her hind legs and she'll balance like when she wants something, or she'll hold up on a table with one paw, and the way her ears, because they've got the long pointed ears but they round a little bit at the top, so she reminds me of a dog man or a werewolf sometimes, and I just love it. And she's so cute. I love that dog. But again, I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I don't know really how to fully answer that question. I apologize. I can't tell you for sure if I've imprinted on them or they on me, but I think it's something like akin to the dogs where they know about people.
No need to apologize. All you can do is just do the best you can to try and guess and figure it out. Next question is from Matt McGuire, and Matt wants to know, can you elaborate on the teeth? Some say dogmen have rows of teeth. Did you notice that?
I didn't see anything beyond what would be the regular rows, the top and the bottom, nothing like a shark where there's multiple rows or anything. But they were definitely not normal like dog teeth. They looked sharp all throughout, but just the 2 rows that I could see.
DJ Chris Mack has a question for you. He wants to know, what color was the dog man and what type was it?
So
Alsatian head, hyena, or other canine type?
his head looked like a wolf to me. Like, I know a lot of people talk like he had the German Shepherd head or like a pit bull head or like a baboon head. He looked like he had a wolf's head to me, just bigger. And as for the coloration, I mentioned before, he had that coyote color to him. Like coyotes and timber wolves, they have that mixture to them, like the white, the light gray, the light brown, the black, all that kind of mixed together. So like if you've ever seen a coyote or a timber wolf, or if you look up the picture, that's the color that he was.
That's a good description. Well, Cody, it's time for us to get out of here. But before we do, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing the details of these experiences with us. It's clear to see that doing so was not easy for you. But like I told you before, I've got no doubts you are going to benefit and grow from doing this and seeing all the support from all the people who listen when they reach out to you. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vic, for everything you've done, for having me on. From the time that you and I first spoke a couple days ago, that was, like I said, that was the first time I've ever told anybody. And I felt such a weight lifted off my shoulders. I've felt good the last couple of days. I've been in a much better mood because it's something that I held on to for 17 years. And then you pile that on top of all these other mental issues that I had. It's just draining, but I feel so much lighter and I feel just happier now. And I feel like I've come to accept so much more of not only myself, but of this absolutely terrifying, but at the same time, absolutely beautiful creature.
I'm sure it's not lost on you that so many people out there listening to you talk about these experiences would literally give the left arm to have those experiences. I know you don't feel lucky to have them, but in their eyes, they do see it that way. So please keep that in mind. And like I told you before, I am so glad that this whole experience, talking about your encounters with me and sharing the encounters with the listeners here, I'm so glad this has been so cathartic for you because, yeah, that's what this is all about.
Absolutely. Vic, I cannot thank you enough for the service that you do for me and everybody else that has ever had this. And to everybody listening, thank you so much. I told Vic before, I said, I'm super nervous about doing this. This is only the second time I've told anybody, and it's going out to a ton of people. And, we didn't do a regular recording like a lot of people do on the show. We just went straight to the live stream. So I'm like, oh my gosh. But thank you. Thank you all. You've all been great.
You had those nerves, but you knocked it out of the park. You did a top-notch job. I'm really impressed. I am. And for the people out there listening, if you've had a dogman encounter and would like to share it with me, whether in private or if you want to be on the show and put it out there that way, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you submit a report and complete the fields on the report, then I'll be more than happy to contact you and schedule a conversation with you. And if you've been listening to the show on YouTube, please don't forget to like the video if you liked what you heard and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Over half of the people who listen to the show, if I remember right, aren't even subscribed to the show because of the regularity when I release shows on every Friday night. But having said all that, thanks again so much for coming on, Cody, and sharing those experiences. I really appreciate you doing that. And for all the listeners out there, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and have a great night.